So you've probably heard this most famous definition of yoga. Yoga's chittavarti nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. It comes from the Yoga Sutra, chapter 1, verse number 2. But less quoted is the one that comes right after that. Tada drashtu svarupi vashtanam. When that is accomplished, the stilling of the mind, the seer abides in its own true nature. For me, this verse is so interesting, and it really captures like the essence of the yoga philosophy. And I'll tell you why. What is the seer? What is the seer, and what is it seeing? That is what we're going to look at in the video today. These are two key terms which are at the center of like the yoga philosophy's understanding of how the world and reality works. And these words seer and seen, so seer is the drashtra, and the seen is the drishya. Both of these are nouns that come from the verbal root drush in Sanskrit. Patanjali uses these words to refer to Puruṣa, which is consciousness, and Prakṛti, which is material nature. And this whole dualistic view of reality that is central to classical yoga, and it gets it from this sister philosophy called Sankhya. In Sankhya, they try to work out what on earth reality is. Where does it come from? And so the word Sankhya actually means enumeration. It breaks down all of reality into tattvas or elements. I've already talked actually a little bit about these when I talked about mind, because manas, buddhi, and ahankara are three of these tattvas. Now, Puruṣa and Prakṛti actually are the most important ones of all, because that's where everything originates. And everything that we can witness and everything that we can be even comes from Puruṣa and Prakṛti. So let's understand what it is. First of all, let's talk about Prakṛti, because it's the stuff that we know. So Prakṛti comes also from this verbal root kr, which is to create, to make, and pra, which means like to bring forth. And Prakṛti is everything that we can see, everything that we are aware of. This video is Prakṛti. The clouds are Prakṛti. The table, the chair, everything is Prakṛti. The trees, the birds. Your body is Prakṛti. It's made. And also, crucially, the mind is Prakṛti. What really separates yoga from Western philosophical systems is that whereas in the West we have a duality, but it's a mind-body duality, you know, the Cartesian duality of like, I think, therefore I am. Your mind is like who you are. The mind is aligned with the soul. In the yoga system, it's not like that. You have the mind is part of material reality. And I'll tell you why. First of all, if you can become aware of it, it's not you. If you can hold it in your field of awareness, it's not you. And if you've ever sat in meditation, that's what you're doing. You're watching your mind. Secondly, your mind changes. It fluctuates. It drives you nuts. That means it's Prakṛti. Anything that is made must necessarily change, die, go through the processes of fluctuation. That's the whole like defining characteristic of what Prakṛti is. On the other hand, you've got Puruṣa. And Puruṣa is consciousness. And it may seem difficult to kind of tangle apart mind and consciousness, but in the mind video, the video that I made earlier, which is what is mind, we kind of take that apart a little bit, but also I'm going to go into it a bit more here so that you can understand it. This word Puruṣa is very ancient. We see it in the Rig Veda even, although it kind of has a different meaning back then. It comes from the word person, and it actually is cognate with the English word person. Although we're not really sure about how this word breaks down, but it may come from the word puru, which means a being connected with the sun, but that's not clear. More important than that is basically that Puruṣa, we understand it as universal consciousness. And the thing is, if it's not, so Prakṛti is everything that we're aware of. And so Puruṣa, on the other hand, is everything that's not that. And this poses an eternal and very, frustrating dilemma, which is, how can we know Puruṣa if we can't be aware of it? But the answer is this. It's the very power of knowing. It's the seer. Can you see the seer? Can you shine a light on the light? There's lots of metaphors that kind of commentators use to kind of try and you can't shine a light on the headlight kind of thing. That's what it is. And the entire yoga system is created to help you be able to perceive the perceiver, or to rest in the untrue nature of the seer. So there's a metaphor that I really like that helps me to understand this. And it's one of a cathedral with light shining through stained glass. So if you picture a beautiful cathedral with great panes of stained glass in many colors, not only in beautiful designs, but also with various stories from the Bible. And you have characters, and you have designs, and you have colors, and all of this is beautiful and fantastic. But the thing is, you can't see it until the light shines through. And so in this metaphor, for me, the cathedral the stained glass is Prakṛti, and the sun is Puruṣa. Puruṣa is what illuminates material existence. But then again, it goes the other way around, is that material existence makes this consciousness, which is so subtle, actually visible, because the fact that it animates it brings it all to life. So understanding this duality of Puruṣa and Prakṛti, of consciousness and material reality, of understanding that reality is made up of this magical, pure and eternal consciousness, and then material reality, which is what makes it visible. Understanding that is key to understanding all of our problems and our misery, because the yoga system teaches us that all of our misery comes from the fact that we identify with Prakṛti. We think that we are this body, we think that we are this mind, when really we, or at least we, the I that knows, the I that sees, is actually Puruṣa, just kind of clothed in this reality. We associate ourselves with the mind just because consciousness shines through the mind, but the mind is just another material manifestation. Consciousness is what we really are. And this confusion, this identifying ourselves with Prakṛti only, is called avidya, or ignorance, or delusion, or misunderstanding. And so why should we care, though? Why should we want to separate ourselves from the material world? Well, it works like this. The material world is bound by the rules and the laws of cause and effect. This is key to the yoga system. Yoga is obsessed with cause and effect, and it understands that everything happens like this. And one of the ways of that cause and effect is named is this word you've probably heard before, karma, which I'm going to talk about in a separate video because I am very interested in this topic. So in the material world, when we act, we create an effect. And then the effect becomes a cause of another act. We do something, or you eat a cake and you go, that was a delicious cake. I want more cake. And then, so it creates the karma of you wanting more cake. I really love cake. And then you eat so much cake that you put on a few pounds, and then you're like, okay, I need to go for a run. And so this run is the result of you eating the cake in the first place. It's cause and effect. And it understands that it's a cycle. The cycle is named samsara, which is the cycle of rebirth. And it can be rebirth between lives, like you die and then you become reincarnated as a frog because you did froggy things in your past life. Or it's within your life cycle that you do stuff and it makes you do stuff. And yoga is concerned with breaking out of that cycle and achieving liberation. Now, the thing is that the more you understand that you are Puruṣa doesn't act. Puruṣa doesn't act. Puruṣa doesn't eat the cake. Puruṣa is just the knower of your body that eats the cake, and of your mind that eats the cake, and of your nervous system, and of your tongues and your glands that does all this. All of this is the material manifestation. But you, the center, the light at all of this, is not actually touched by any of this. I wanted to read a little quote from the Sankhya Karika, which is the 4th century text, which is kind of like the the Bible of Sankhya that we have, of classical Sankhya, written by Ishvara Krishna, or composed rather. So this verse goes like this. No one is actually either bound or liberated, nor does anyone transmigrate. It's only Prakrti in her various manifestations who is bound, transmigrates, and released. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, constantly Krishna tells Arjuna, it's not you who is acting, it's the body that acts. It's not, the eternal self, it's not the Atman, it's not you. That's another word which can be associated with Purusha, which actually in the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali uses the word Purusha and Atman as well as seer interchangeably, right? So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, it's not you who acts, it's Prakrti that's acting. So don't be afraid, stand up, go and fight in the battle. Yeah, so yoga seeks to liberate us from this cycle of karma and rebirth. And all of the yoga practices that we have are here to rectify this situation. Still in the Yoga Sutra, it tells us in chapter 2 that the whole purpose of Prakrti is for the liberation of the Purusha. By looking at the outside world, by realizing how concrete it is, when you actually study it, you realize it's not you. Now that seems unfathomable, but like this, if you do a physical yoga practice, the more you work with the body, the more you realize that it changes, the more you realize that it's just a body, that actually you get less identified with it personally. And that is key to the entire thing. The more you work with your body, the more you realize that there's something else inside it which is actually eternal, or at least separate from this physical thing. Similarly, with meditation practice, the more you observe the mind, the more you realize that it's a fluctuating thing, or uncontrollable as the wind, as it's described in chapter 6 of the Gita. And you realize that can't be the you, that's the youest you. So a key question, however, is, do we really want to leave behind Prakrti? Because that's what the Yoga Sutra is suggesting. It's saying you should disentangle yourself from Prakrti in order to find kaivalya, liberation, isolation, the aloneness of being only with your consciousness. So if you are like a fully dedicated ascetic living in the mountains, and that's what you want, then practice the Yoga Sutras techniques, and that will happen for you. Now, do we actually want to do that? Well, the answer is up to you, but I just wanted to let you know that this kind of dualistic view of Puruṣa and Prakṛti, as it went through other yoga traditions, changed a little bit. Clearly, the consciousness and material reality system is a duality. It understands that nature is dualistic. And I'm sure you're aware that the yoga tradition is full of non-dual philosophies. Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Shaiva Tantra are two examples, okay? Basically, the two things that these things have in common, apart from anything else, is that the non-dual view, the understanding that reality is all one. And in this system, you have the notion that, as my teacher has explained it to me, that Purusha is like the animating principle. Purusha is the consciousness that pervades everything. And Prakrti is the material nature, which is just the manifestation of this consciousness. So they're two aspects of the same. So later schools, for example, ones who use the gods and the goddesses like Siva Sakti or Krishna and Radha to represent the consciousness. So for example, Shiva represents pure consciousness, and Shakti is the energy and the manifestation of nature. This dance of the male and the female, of the consciousness and it's a dance, and it's an interchange of energy, and it's an interchange of energy and an interplay that allows us to experience the world not only as a material existence, as the things that we see in our daily life, but also as this divine element that pervades it all. So how is this relevant to our daily life? And this, I always come back to this question, because otherwise, why study yoga philosophy? For me, it's like this. The material world can get you down because it is fluctuating, because it has its ups and downs, because it's constantly changing. You can't pin it down. You can't get things to happen that you really want. And if you can get caught up in the day-to-day and the details of it. And I'm not suggesting that you go by it. I'm not planning on, leaving the material world at any point soon. However, remembering that there's something else, and not only remembering, but feeling and striving to experience that there's something else animating all of this, really gives me hope, and really allows me to see the big picture, and really allows me to find sense and joy in the very day-to-day existence. If I remember that my computer and my sofa and the plants in my room, I'm just naming stuff I can see, if I remember that all of these things are pervaded by Puruṣa, or that they wouldn't exist without Puruṣa, then I get really enchanted. And more than that, if I am Puruṣa, then it means that this body is not such a limitation. I hope that's useful for you as well. And if there's any questions or any comments, of course, please do comment below, because I'd love to have a chat about it. Until next time, Om Shanti.